Hello, friends. I am Tex Mars, and I'm so glad you're with me. We've got an important topic to examine today. In recent weeks, I've gotten so many letters from my friends across America and even the world asking me what significance to Christendom and to the American patriot community was the recent bombing of the federal building in Oklahoma City. It's very important for us to understand that this has significant and important prophetic implications for the last days. It may only be one act of terror, one horror that is to befall mankind in the last days. But we need to look at this in perspective of what God's Word says. And I would like for us to begin by looking at God's Word. The book of Revelation, chapter 13, beginning with verse 3. It tells us here and reveals the last day story of the beast. It's the world system that will envelop this planet in the last days. And the Bible depicts this world system as a great beast. It says of this beast that all the world wondered after the beast. In other words, they were amazed at his power, at his incredible ability. The book of Daniel, of course, remember, said that he will even speak, this beast will speak dark sentences. Craft, that is witchcraft, will prosper in his hands. It says here, and they, that is the general population of the world, being, of course, ignorant of the truth, they worshipped the dragon which gave power unto the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And there was given to him, the beast, a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, and them that dwell in heaven. And, this is verse 7, my friends, and it was given unto him to make war with the saints, and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. And that, my friends, is not paranoia. That is the Word of God. Power to make war with the saints. Power to bring bloody rule over the face of the earth. Bloodshed. And that is why we title this video, The Bloodstained Hands of Big Brother Government. Some years ago, George Orwell, a British writer, wrote this book, 1984. Talked about Big Brother government, double speak. It talked about a totalitarian system of government, perhaps in the last days. Well, we're past the year 1984, but it seems that the conditions that George Orwell predicted are happening even now as I am speaking to you in this video. That is why this year I wrote this book, Big Sister is Watching You. Now we have the feminist movement, the radical feminazis. We have Hillary Rodham Clinton, and yes, along with Big Brother, we have Big Sister. This has been a long time in coming. This horrible bloodshed that's caused by Big Brother. Not only here in America, but across the world, the New World Order has been gaining more and more ground. We're going to be exposing some of its tricks today, and some of the secrets and hidden things and mysteries they don't want you to know. There is a history of lies and deception and, yes, murder across the decades, even the centuries, that we're going to talk about. And today we see growing evidence of Big Brother and the jackbooted thugs of the federal government coming down against the ordinary people of America. And that is why recent polls have shown that people no longer trust their government. A Yankelovich survey, a poll, showed that 9 out of 10 Americans surveyed stated that they did not trust their own government. Over around 40% of the people, that's 4 out of 10, stated that they believe their government is an immediate threat to their rights, liberties, and freedoms. An immediate threat. Other polls have shown even greater statistics believing such. I want you to understand that things that have been occurring in society, whether it was the Waco bloodbath or the CIA horrors of the last few decades, especially since World War II, these things are part of a pattern. Now, satanic world government has existed really all the way back to the Garden of Eden. But the Bible says in 2 Thessalonians 2 that all things will come to fullness in the last days. Thomas Jefferson, of course, and the people of early colonial America suffered under a system of injustice. But, my friends, it was nothing compared to what we have to suffer today. These people back then had more freedoms under British tyranny and King George than you and I have today. Here's what Thomas Jefferson stated about tyranny and about this pattern of tyranny by government. He said, "Single acts of tyranny may be ascribed to the accidental opinion of a day, but a series of oppressions begun at a distinguished period and pursued unalterably through every change of ministers or administrations too plainly proves a deliberate, systematic plan of reducing us to slavery." A systematic plan of reducing us to slavery. What was true in Thomas Jefferson's day, my friend, is absolutely more true. It is magnified today. Recently, Mr. Wayne Pierre, head of the National Rifle Association, they have 3.5 million members strong here in the United States, put out a letter to the membership of the NRA. He said some amazing things. I would like to read these to you. This is from USA Today. Here's what he said. He wrote this letter and he sent it to every one of all of our legislatures in Washington, D.C. He talked about jackbooted government thugs having the power to take away our constitutional rights, break in our doors, seize our guns, destroy our property, and even injure or kill us. He said this. Now I'm talking about Wayne LaPierre, the executive director of the NRA. He said that in Clinton's administration, and this is a quote, in Clinton's administration, if you have a badge, you have the government's go-ahead to harass, intimidate, even murder law-abiding citizens. He said what we have today are FBI agents, quote, wearing Nazi bucket helmets and black stormtrooper uniforms to attack law-abiding citizens. Can you imagine the NRA putting out a letter like this? Well, why would they do so? By the way, they were savagely attacked by the Clinton administration and those that are trying to stop the truth from being spread. But the fact is, my friends, these things are now escalating, and I think it is a sign of the last days. Now, the latest atrocity was Oklahoma City. Now, we covered that in another video, and I hope you obtained a copy of that, called Fascist Terror Stalking America. Fascist Terror Stalking America. But I want to cover it very briefly again, not going into all of the elements of the bombing and the fact that it is very, very possible, extremely likely, in fact, that the federal government, with its hit teams of CIA, FBI, BATF, that they actually perpetrated this horrible and heinous crime against humanity. But I would like to tell you the end results, how, in fact, that we now have a gathering police state apparatus because of the Oklahoma City bombing. So you see who benefits the most. Who makes the most capital off the Oklahoma City bombing? It is not patriots. It is not good, ordinary American citizens. It is not the Christian fundamentalists that will profit from the Oklahoma City bombing. It is the monsters of Big Brother government, the New World Order across this nation and across the globe. Here in Globe magazine, which is a tabloid which puts out trash. And believe me, there's not very much you should believe in any tabloid. But I picked this one off the supermarket when Wanda and I were there because I thought of the idiocy and the unfairness that it represents. Look at it. There is McVeigh's picture. And it says, "Terror Bombers Chilling Confessions." Well, first of all, he hasn't even said a word yet. He may be talking, I don't know, but they certainly wouldn't know about it. And I would like to mention another thing. In America, you're innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. They're already calling the man a terror bomber. I seriously doubt that the man did it. I don't care if they're giving him now psychoactive drugs under the CIA or FBI's direction. They could very well be brainwashing McVeigh. He may even come back and confess, because this is the way they do, just as they did the brainwashing sessions in North Vietnam to our POWs, and North Korea to our POWs during the Korean conflict. Yes, they have the tools. They're keeping McVeigh incommunicado, confined at a military base. They're not going to let him speak to the press, just like they didn't let Lee Harvey Oswald speak to the press. But look at that. These people have already judged McVeigh. Already judged him. If they had done this with O.J. Simpson, they'd be looking at a very stiff, multi-million-dollar lawsuit. But McVeigh is just a young man who has no money. He's locked away, and they can get away with it. Well, when we see Newsweek and Time magazine, it's not much better than that, my friends. One of those news magazines carried McVeigh's face and said, "The face of terror." There's no justice in America, but there is a police state agenda now on a rocket path upward. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that. Look at President Clinton's remark. He was interviewed on CBS's 60 Minutes. And all I can say is, my friends, I want to know who wrote the questions for Bill Clinton and his answers, because it was all prepared in advance. Either the producers of 60 Minutes wrote the questions for him and the answers, or the White House wrote them and sent them over to 60 Minutes and said, "Here's what we want you to ask us." Because it was a put-up staged display of really stupidity and evil on the part of Bill Clinton. Here's what he stated. Quote, "Americans may have to sacrifice a few of their freedoms in order to achieve any degree of security from terrorism." Do you get that, my friends? Are you ready to sacrifice your freedoms because of one evil act that probably was perpetrated by the government? And even if it was by a man like McVeigh or associates, does that mean you have to give up your constitutional rights? That's what Bill Clinton would like you to do, my friends. Let's look at some of these things that are already going on. Here is an article in the Austin American-Statesman, May 4th, 1995. The Deputy Attorney General, a feminazi, Jamie Gorelick, told a House Crime Subcommittee that her department will review state militia laws and then come up with federal standards. How interesting. They're after the militias. There's no known connection with the Oklahoma City bombing. It doesn't matter. They're a threat to big brother government. They've got to be done away with. I want to go very quickly over some of these headlines and show you the police state that is gathering forces, all because of this pretext of the Oklahoma City bombing. As hideous as that was, I'm telling you, these people want to profit from us, and they are going to make Bible prophecy come to pass by their making war against the saints of God, according to Revelation 13. Look at this article. Clinton anti-terrorism bill has new backers. Here is some information about the anti-terrorist bill in another newsletter. You may be surprised to know that you are a terrorist. You see, the definition of a terrorist is so broad. It's not a person who breaks a law. It's a person who suggests that their government might be wrong about something. Did you know that according to this omnibus anti-terrorist bill, President Bill Clinton of the Justice Department will have a list established. A list. And they will list all of the groups that they believe are terrorists. Not because of any criminal acts, but because of their beliefs. Either their religious beliefs, or their political beliefs, or their cultural or social beliefs. They will be classified as a terrorist organization, put on a list. And anyone who donates money to these groups, gets on their newsletters, helps them in any way, That's right. You can be indicted. You can be put before a federal trial, jury, and judge, and you can be locked away for up to 30 years. Maybe just for sending a $20 love gift to a Christian ministry or to a patriotic organization. Well, these people are after the enemies of the state. And who are the enemies of the state? All Christians, all patriots, all people who are against abortion, all people who simply want their Second Amendment rights to keep and bear arms. And I can go on and on with a list of enemies, and I did so on that video, Fascist Terror Stalking America. Here's another one from the New York Times. Clinton seeks 1,000 new agents and expanded role for military in fight against terrorism. Yet another, USA Today. Broad FBI power sought. USA mourns Clinton targeting terrorists. Yeah, sure, terrorists. Empower the FBI. Friends, they already have so much power now, they are the terrorists. Here is Deputy Attorney General Jamie Gorelick, the feminazi, along with FBI Director Louis Freeh. He's the guy that told the BATF and others we must share our talk. And there is Senator Orrin Hatch, the Mormon senator from Utah, who is helping the FBI and the Justice Department and Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich put together this anti-terrorist act, and they want to slam dunk it on America. By the time you view this video, it may or may not already be law. I pray not. GOP, it says, that's the Republican Party, offers anti-terror bill. Another one, USA Today, April 27, 1995. Clinton anti-terrorist wish list, 1,000 agents. Here's another one from another newspaper. It says FBI chief seeks cash to combat terrorism. Here's another one. Clinton plan would broaden FBI powers. Now, friends, even before this Oklahoma City Act, the government was already trying to snatch as much police Gestapo power as it could. Look at this in the Spotlight magazine. Reno wants national hit teams. Could operate anywhere in the U.S. SWAT teams. Up to 2,500 member rapid deployment team. Not just 300 or 400. 2,500 they want. I want you to look at the date of this, February 27th, 1995. That's right. That's right. Up to 2 months before the Oklahoma City bombing, they wanted this authority. The anti-terrorism bill of Senator Joseph Biden and Mr. Schumer over in the House was already sitting there. It had already been introduced. They were waiting for the bombing. In other words, Janet Reno, Butch Reno, the Attorney General, had already put together this plan and sent it to Congress, wanting a 2,500 member rapid deployment force. It was already sitting there. But they needed a catalyst. They needed a dramatic event, a horrible act that would so stun the nation that the whole nation would say, yes, 1,000 more Big Brother agents. Yes, give them as much money as they need. Millions and millions more dollars. Yes, give the FBI and the CIA and the other agencies more police powers. Yes, create this rapid deployment force. Do anything to save our necks. We will give up our security. Our constitutional rights for a little margin more of security. Well, there's so much more we could talk about in this area. One of the items that I believe now has a chance for passage, unfortunately, is H.R. 666. Here's that bill. I call it the BSLAC 666 bill. Imagine, 666. I think we know what that stands for, that number in Revelation 13, the number of the beast. This will take away our right to be secure in our own homes and our papers and effects, because it gives the police almost unbelievable and unlimited search and seizure powers. It's already been passed by the House. Now it will probably be passed by the Senate after this Oklahoma City bombing. Again, who profits? You and I know. Here is the flashpoint issue in which I expose these BSLAC 666 laws. Now, one of the things I think is very scary, as you know, during the Cold War with Russia, they developed a system of satellites and spy satellites that would travel around this globe and take pictures with very high-tech, high-definition resolution cameras, and it is claimed that these cameras are so accurate from satellites that they can literally take your front yard and depict whether you have golf balls or whether you have a certain kind of shrubbery in your front yard, and this is from many miles up in space. Well, now, as I understand it, instead of dismantling these spy satellites, because after all, the Russian bear is no threat to us anymore, guess what? They're continuing to spend billions of dollars for the satellite spy network. Why? Well, they needed an excuse, and so Vice President Al Gore says, we're going to be using these to survey the earth continuously so we can keep track of the environment and whether Mother Earth is suffering. Sure. Now they're going to use them for environmental purposes, to track the depletion of the jungle down in South America and so forth. Absolute nonsense. They're going to use them to spy on you and me. Big Brother operates again. Here we have in Covert Action magazine a picture of what has been called the National Reconnaissance Office, the NRO. Hundreds of millions of dollars were spent for this, and even Congress didn't know the money was being spent. But here is a picture of it. Look at this incredibly huge complex. Here, in U.S. News and World Report, is yet another picture of the National Reconnaissance Office as it's being built. Look at these gigantic buildings up close. Well, it's so fascinating to me that in this issue of the Austin American Statesman, it's August 9th, 1984, here is the article. It says, Spy Agency Kept Congress in Dark. Friends, they have no respect. The CIA, the Department of Defense, the DI, Defense Intelligence Agency, the FBI, they have no respect for our legislature. They have no respect for the judicial system, nor for your constitutional rights. They don't even tell Congress what they're doing. They just blow hundreds of millions of dollars. And let me tell you, they spend billions more, not only from the black budget that Congress gives them, but from the fact that they are the number one, I'm talking about the FBI and the CIA, the number one cocaine cartel, drug pushers throughout the world. And they use those billions of dollars for evil purposes. I exposed this some months ago in my newsletter, the fact that this fellow, this Congressman, Neil Smith, from the 4th District of Congress, Ohio, Congressman Smith was the chairman of one of the most influential committees in Congress, the Committee on Appropriations, Subcommittee on Appropriations, actually, and he accidentally let out the fact in his newsletter of October 93 that there has already been developed a National Identification Center. Did you know that, my friends? A National Identification Center. Now, according to Congressman Smith, in his revelations, and by the way, he's all in favor of it, and he refuses now to speak. We've had people write him, and he refuses to speak on this. I think his friends in the CIA and the FBI and the BATF jumped on his back because he had revealed something they didn't want out. He says, quote, we have invested $392 million so far in such a center. He states that by 1998, this center will be up and running. That's why the proposals for the national ID cards. Now, whereas we see this police state developing, one of the major or primary police state agencies, which is FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, suddenly their tarnished reputation is being rehabilitated. Here we have a major newspaper article. It says, to the Oklahoma City bombing, FEMA responds quickly and efficiently. Oh yes, well, they should have. They knew about the blast in advance, no doubt. By the way, Congress, because of what happened in Oklahoma City, because they know the people are furious at Waco and believe that Oklahoma City was a result of Waco, the Congress now says they're going to finally hold hearings over 2 years later on what really happened at Waco. But guess what? In the Senate, the senator that's going to conduct the hearings, the chairman of the committee, is none other than Arlen Specter, Republican of Pennsylvania. Arlen Specter, Mr. CIA, Arlen Specter. He's the guy that first developed the magic bullet theory of the JFK assassination. This guy runs around the country. I saw him on the Larry King Show complimenting Bill Clinton's anti-terrorist bill. He says we need to stop these militias. They're unlawful. Arlen Specter hates the pro-life movement. He is an abortion rights promoter extraordinaire. This guy is just, he's a demon spirit as far as I'm concerned. He's got one in him. He's a human being. He needs to be cleansed of his demon spirit. And so now Arlen Specter says, yes, we will investigate Waco. It's a little bit late, my friends. And out of the fence, because they left the gate open. The fact is, American people know already what happened in Waco. Sure, the Congress should investigate it. But Arlen Specter, he's the guy that thinks everything the government did in Waco is just great. It's going to be a whitewash. Then, over in the House side, Congressman Bill McCollum of Florida is going to do the investigation. They'll have a committee there. You see, they're trying to appease you. They're going to say, yes, we had hearings, and we found the government really made some mistakes. Yes, they were a little macho. Yes, they made blunders, but there's no cover-up. Don't believe it. Let me tell you something, my friends. The government murdered. They burned to death 86 innocent Branch Davidians. They may have been guilty of some things, and certainly they were heretical in their Bible teachings. No doubt about that. I would have liked to have met David Koresh and just told the guy he was just a devil for his heretical teachings. But they did not. They did not do anything worthy of being burned to death after being tortured for 56 days. Well, the fact is, Congressman Bill McCollum of Florida is the very congressman, the one who is now going to have Waco hearings, is the very congressman who introduced into the U.S. House of Representatives H.R. Bill 666. The guy that gave us the 666 bill to take away our Fourth Amendment rights against illegal search and seizure. Now the guy says he's going to investigate the Waco thing. Look for a whitewash, my friends, about what happened at Waco. And the question is, what happened at Waco? I'm going to discuss that with you very, very quickly. What did happen at Waco? Then we're going to go way back in history, before Waco. These aren't the first cases. The Ruby Ridge, Randy Weaver situation, the Waco massacre, Oklahoma City. There is a long string of abuses and lies and murder and assassinations by our own federal government. Friends, in recounting these things, please understand. Please understand. I am not against our government. I am for good government. And the majority of federal government workers and state and local are honest, law-abiding, fine people with loved ones. They need our support. They don't need guff from us. They don't need to be harassed and intimidated by us. They need our love, our caring, our understanding. And let me tell you, some of them do some very valuable jobs. People who work in the Social Security Administration who really care about you. You may say, who? I've never met a bureaucrat that cares. Well, there are some. There are. And you know it. And I know it. There are people in every department of government. Maybe some of those departments shouldn't be there. Perhaps it's wasting our taxpayer dollars. But please, my friends, please separate those few at the top, those evil people that are part of this New World Order conspiracy. Please separate them from the masses of federal workers who are good and just people. And many are Christians, and many more are patriots, just like you and I. And I believe that's true of even quite a few who are in the FBI and the BATF, and yes, in the CIA. Good patriotic Americans. Some of them have quit those agencies because they did not like the abuses, and they knew about the breaking of law by their agency superiors. So keep this in mind, my friends. We are not anti-government. We are anti-Big Brother. We are not anti-federal government worker. We are not at all. We are pro the individual. It's very important for us to remember that as Christians. Waco, what happened? Well, I'm not going to get all into Waco. We've offered videos such as Waco, The Big Lie, and others. There are also many books that are now put out. I received this one in the mail by Jack DeVault. It's an excellent book called The Waco Whitewash. The Waco Whitewash. The Mount Carmel episode told by an eyewitness to the trial. And by the way, it has many of the statements of the actual victims who are now survivors, and unfortunately a number of them are in prison for long sentences, even though they were convicted of no major crime. What really happened there? It's as simple as this, my friends. The government sought to create a pretext, a precedent for the future. They went against a church. They went against a small community. They went against people who believed in their Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. And the government marauders went in with helicopters ablazing, with M60 machine guns shooting right through the roof. Now, I want you to understand that at the trial, there was no evidence that could be presented of the fact that the government fired first. They had the door there. It was a metal door, and they would have been able to tell which direction the bullets went. Were they going in, or were they coming out? And then you would have seen who fired right through the door even first. Guess what? The door was missing. Even though it was heavy gauge metal and could not have burned up in the flames, the FBI and the BATF insisted to the court that it was mysteriously missing. Another thing you have to understand is the fact that certain witnesses inside the few remaining survivors that told that the first thing that happened, in addition to the gunfire coming from the BATF forces, but the machine gun fire from the helicopters overhead, they testified to this right through the roof. And some people were killed. One little girl, reportedly 12 years old, was killed laying in her bed early that morning as the machine gun bullets ripped through the ceiling right into her body. But you see, the building was burned down. There is no evidence. That's why the government burned down the building, to get rid of all the evidence. Now we'll never see those machine gun holes in the ceilings and the roofs of the Mount Carmel building. You know, Jerry Spence, the famous lawyer, he's been on the Larry King show many times. Maybe you saw him in his buckskin outfit. Jerry Spence, probably America's best known and most famous and capable defense lawyer, who defended Randy Weaver in the trial, you know, the Ruby Ridge situation. Randy Weaver did absolutely nothing wrong. He was set up by the BATF. They claimed that he had sold a shotgun that was 1/8 inch too short. That's the only crime he committed, supposedly. 1/8 inch too short, the shotgun that he sold. Who did he sell it to? Oh, a member of the BATF. So, who were the witnesses against him? Yes, the BATF. Well, in any case, when they invaded his little farm, way in the boondocks in Idaho, they started off by shooting his little boy in the back. And then, when his wife opened the door to see what was going on with her little baby in her arm, they shot her right in the head, dead. Now, Jerry Spence, the lawyer, defended Randy Weaver in court, and he was acquitted of the charge of conspiracy to commit murder and resisting arrest. Here's what he said recently about the fact that Larry Potts, the monster and butcher who killed Randy Weaver's little boy and his wife, who was in charge of the whole thing, the FBI agent, the fact that Janet Reno and Louis Freeh, the FBI director, have actually promoted Larry Potts. The very man who perpetrated these horrors has now been promoted. He is now the number 2 man in the FBI. Here's what Jerry Spence said about that. He said, quote, Potts is now going to be the number 2 man in the FBI. This is Jerry Spence speaking. But the result is nobody is prosecuted and nobody goes to jail. He's talking about those that murdered Randy Weaver's child and wife. Nobody is prosecuted. Nobody goes to jail. But the supervisor, Potts, Larry Potts, is promoted and now becomes the deputy director of the FBI. Jerry Spence says It is very frightening if the FBI can get away with killing by decree. And that is what is being glossed over here. Here's a picture of Vicki Weaver. Vicki Weaver. Just like the girl next door. Maybe like your wife. And now she's dead. And they have no remorse, no shame. But they should. Well, I want you to understand that even the judge that tried the Branch Davidians makes you wonder. They said that he wore a Masonic ring every day to court. Well, I want to go back in history with you and show you that there has been a long pattern of abuses and degradations by the federal government, by the New World Order. We will look even at Pearl Harbor. We'll look, if we have time, at the POW-MIA issue. We will look at the JFK assassination, and then we'll see some of the current agendas of the New World Order, of Bill Clinton, the FBI, and the others in the federal government, the big brother agents whose hands are stained with the blood of the innocent. I was recently reading a fascinating article. Excuse my notes sometimes as I write on these little notes on the articles that I get. This is World International News. It talks about Pearl Harbor. Pearl Harbor. December 7th, 1941, FDR, Franklin D. Roosevelt, said it was the day that would live in infamy. It probably was. It was the day that his name, should be in bright lights in infamy. Because now we find out that FDR and the federal government, the Pentagon, knew beforehand that Japan would be attacking Pearl Harbor. But they wanted us in the war. So they gave no orders to the fleet to prepare. They gave no orders to Honolulu, Hawaii to get ready for an attack. You see, my friends, we had broken the code of the Japanese. We knew all of their plans. But FDR had already promised his friends in the Freemasonry International Conspiracy and the secret societies of Great Britain that he would enter the war, and they needed the catalyst. They needed a dramatic act. Did they not need Oklahoma City and the massacre there? It's interesting here in this article that the admiral who was in charge of our fleet there at Pearl Harbor, they blamed him for all of it. They said he wasn't ready. Preparations weren't made. They said that he should have had the people set to go against a possible attack. But now, over 50 years later, his descendants, his family, seeks exoneration. It says, quote, descendants say Kimmel's, that's Admiral Kimmel's superiors, failed to keep him informed. This is from the Hearst newspapers, Washington, D.C. Here's the quote. It says, the family of the late husband Kimmel, the Navy commander at Pearl Harbor when the Japanese attacked in 1941, pleaded with Pentagon officials this week to exonerate him of blame for the catastrophe because recent research shows his Navy superiors withheld vital information about Japanese intentions. Here is the article, by the way, from the New York Times, very recently, Sunday, April 23, 1995. Only now, 50 years later or so, are we finding out this amazing fact. It says, war decoding helped the United States to shape the United Nations. Did you know that we knew all the other nations' secret codes? You see, diplomats send codes back and forth, military sends codes back and forth, their messages in code. But we have terrific cryptographers and intelligence analysts that can break the codes. Talks here about how we were able to intercept the messages of even our own allies. We knew all of their thinking, all of their plans, and it helped America, that's right, America, to create the United Nations. That is, the agents of the New World Order here in America. And then it says this, and I want to read to you this paragraph. In addition to the United Nations, it says, the other case was in 1921, when American experts cracked the Japanese diplomatic code and learned Japan's fallback position on naval construction for a treaty. This information helped the United States at the Washington Conference on Naval Limitation to force the Japanese to accept a greater limit on their warship construction than they wanted. Now imagine, back in 1921, my friends, we broke the Japanese code. So we knew what was going to happen 20 years later in 1941, and FDR let it happen. You know why? So the American people would be inflamed. So, the anti-war movement would be totally snuffed out. And he would be able to go before Congress and say that since this dastardly act, December 7th, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Empire of Japan. So much more we could talk about that. The POW MIA issue. There's an article in New American magazine. It says, a wound that won't heal. A wound that won't heal. But why won't it heal? I'll tell you why, my friends. Because in Korea and World War II, and yes, in Vietnam, our POWs, our prisoners of war, and our MIAs were betrayed. They were betrayed. Not many people will talk about this. This woman did. She's Dolores Alfon, chairperson of the National Alliance of Families for the Return of America's Missing Servicemen. She says, despite promises made to families, commercial interests, that's money people, the financiers, the bankers, the corporate interests, the fascists are driving U.S. policy. That's really what she's saying in essence. Vietnam, MIA betrayal. MIA betrayal. Here's USA Today. USA Today, September 22, 1992. Look at this headline, my friends. POWs left behind, say Nixon aides. POWs left behind, say Nixon aides. I wrote about this in Flashpoint, an article entitled Of Presidents, Prisoners of War, and Beasts. I'll tell you who the beasts are. Truman, Eisenhower, Nixon, Bill Clinton. Now we've opened up diplomatic relations. We've opened up commercial relations with Vietnam, even though hundreds and hundreds of our POWs are still missing. Maybe they are dead by now after all these years. But Kissinger knew, Nixon knew they were still there. But money meant more to these men. Now look at this article in USA Today, November 24th, 1992. It says, reward Hanoi, Kerry says. Reward Hanoi. In other words, we don't reward the North Vietnamese communist butchers. Kerry says, oh, there's no big deal about these POWs, MIAs. Now, John Kerry, the senator from Massachusetts, you have to understand, as a member of the Skull and Bones Society, a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, he held hearings, and all he did was cover up the POW, MIA issue. You know, the Rambo movies were correct. Well, I think one of the most horrible tragedies today, though, has to do with the Persian Gulf veterans. Did you know that they received secretly immunizations, experimental vaccines and toxins? This is something the government doesn't want to tell you about. Here's an article, very interesting, New York Times, January 18th, 1991. Our guinea pigs in the Gulf. It says here, the Pentagon ignores Nuremberg, the Nuremberg war trials. Our guinea pigs in the Gulf. Could that be true? Well, my friends, it's very interesting. So many people are saying they're suffering from this Persian Gulf illness. The Persian Gulf illness. Many people that served admirably and honorably and heroically in the Persian Gulf War now have come down with crippling arthritises, and they're even passing these on to their loved ones. You say, oh, come on, I don't believe that. I don't believe that we would have infected our own servicemen so that thousands and thousands would come down with crippling, debilitating illnesses. Well, here's a bulletin from the American Association of Blood Banks. The American Association of Blood Banks, dated November 12th, 1991. Ask yourself why the control liberal Big Brother assisting media won't tell you these facts. It says the American Association of Blood Banks issues statement on Leishmania tropica, calls for donor referral of Persian Gulf military. You know what they're saying? There's some strange illness which they gave a name to, Leishmania tropica. And they're saying to all of the blood banks across America, do not accept donors who served in the Persian Gulf. Their blood might be tainted with some kind of a disease or virus. Can you imagine? The blood banks won't take the blood of Persian Gulf veterans. They know it was poisoned by the government, obviously. Well, Criminal Politics, a magazine that does tell the truth. examine this very issue. Operation Desert Storm, the duplicity, the truth about illegal research, production, and sale of biological weapons and their use on our troops in Desert Storm. Here, for example, is a picture of Colonel Herb Smith. Notice he's in a wheelchair. In a wheelchair. And there are many more like him. How did he get this sickness? The Persian Gulf conflict. There are many things, my friends, they're not telling you. Big Brother has blood-stained hands. Now let's go back to the JFK assassination. Again, there have been 1,000 books written on the JFK assassination. And I'm not going to have the time, obviously, to go in these, just as I didn't with the Waco incident. Here's a picture of JFK, his brother Bobby, and of course Chappaquiddick Ted on the right hand over there. JFK. Well, not too long ago, a man sent me a detailed confidential report of some of his own investigation. I can't give you his name, I can't disclose it, but it's very interesting that he made some very interesting observations. For example, the Masonic influence on the Warren Commission that attempted to blame Oswald as the lone assassin. Did you know that Earl Warren, the head of the Warren Commission, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, was a 33rd degree Mason? Did you know that the Chief Counsel was a CIA man? Did you know that Allen Dulles was the person who really directed the everyday workings of the Warren Commission? And Allen Dulles was CIA director, or had been, until he had been fired by President John F. Kennedy for messing up and lying to the president during the Bay of Pigs invasion by the CIA of Cuba. I want you to understand this. In other words, Allen Dulles was head of the CIA. He lied to the president. He messed up terribly in the Bay of Pigs tragedy with Cuba. He was fired by President Kennedy, and then he was made a member of the Warren Commission. And by the way, one of the men who was on the legal staff for the Warren Commission, one of the men was none other than Senator Orlin Specter, Republican of Pennsylvania, the same man who is going to now, supposedly with his committee which he chairs in the U.S. Senate, investigate the Waco massacre by the government. Believe me, it's a big setup. Orlin Specter, he came up with a magic bullet theory. He said that it was only one bullet, and of course it traveled through the body of Governor John Connally, and then it changed directions and came back and hit John F. Kennedy. Amazing. A magic bullet theory by Orlin Specter. He was on the Warren Commission. Now let's talk a little bit about a couple of agencies that we all know about, the CIA and the FBI. The CIA, my friends, you would be amazed at the horrors that they have perpetrated throughout the years. They first began as the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, during World War II. Then, after World War II, it was the OSS, which then became the CIA under Harry Truman, President Harry Truman. It was they who covered up the Nazi war criminals. Those that weren't tried at Nuremberg, there were many more, and that many of them were brought to America for use on our space program, or in our space program. Even Werner von Braun, it has been reported, may have been part of this Nazi network. It's interesting, too, that such horrible men as Joseph Mengele, the concentration camp doctor, the brutal, inhumane Joseph Mengele, may have been assisted in his escape after World War II down to South America by our CIA. The CIA gave it, this operation, a name. It was called Operation Paperclip. Operation Paperclip. In exchange for their help to the Central Intelligence Agency, then known as the OSS, they actually recruited former intelligence agents, former concentration camp officials, and so forth of the Nazi government. They gave them false passports, false visas, forged ones, and set them up in business. Many of them came over here to America to assist the setting up of a Big Brother Gestapo estate right here in the United States of America. I was recently reading this book by Robert Lifton, The Nazi Doctors, and I thought about it. The Nazi doctors, how many of them came to America after World War II? The most recent example of CIA abuse was in the Jennifer Harbury case. Here is, for example, from U.S. News and World Report, April 10th, 1995, an article about the CIA. Here is Jennifer Harbury from Austin, Texas, with a picture of her husband. And here's the situation. Her husband went down to Guatemala. There, he was murdered by a Guatemalan army colonel. Miss Harbury found out through various sources and through a congressman, Robert Turricello of New Jersey, a Democrat, by the way, that her husband had been murdered by this army colonel down in Guatemala. And she found out that the army colonel was on the payroll of the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States of America. This is not unusual, however, my friends. The CIA is responsible for thousands of assassinations across the globe, many here in the United States over the years. Here is more on the death in Guatemala. Senators accuse CIA of deceit. Here's another woman, Mrs. Devine, with a picture of her husband that was also killed down in Guatemala. Believe me, a few senators will scream and say bad things about the CIA, and it'll all be covered up. This is the pattern that has gone on for many, many years. Here's an editorial from the San Antonio Express News. They're recommending that we, quote, fully air the CIA's Guatemala role. Maybe they should air the CIA's role in the JFK assassination and the Oklahoma City bombing and many more things that have occurred. You may remember the situation with Jim Jones in the People's Temple down in Guyana. My friends, there's more there than meets the eye. Did you know that according to Joseph Holsinger, he was Congressman Leo Ryan's age? Remember Congressman Ryan, who went to investigate down in Guyana, Jim Jones and the People's Temple, and he ended up getting killed, shot there on the flight line as they were trying to take off in their airplane. Here's what Joseph Holsinger, now the congressman's aide, said about this after a full investigation. By the way, such people as John Judge and others have investigated, found out the same thing. Said, quote, Jonestown was an experimental part of a 30-year CIA program called MK Ultra, the CIA and military intelligence code name for mind control. Did you know, my friends, that Richard Dwyer, a 21-year-old CIA veteran, just happened to be there during the Jonestown massacre and came back to talk about it? What was he doing there? The CIA. The fact is, and I'm going to quote again from Joseph Holsinger, who did the investigation, and also from John Judge, who did this investigation. And by the way, there's been so much written on this, but the mass media won't report it. Meticulous daily notes and drug records were kept on inmates in Jonestown. A combination of thorazine and other drugs, drug mixtures, and hypnotics, electroshock, and torture were used to develop robots, laborers, plant slaves. Concentration camps. This was not a religious cult, my friends. This was a CIA concentration camp they had set up down there in South America. Why? They were performing experimental procedures on these poor people. By the way, I want you to understand, 90% of the people that died, almost 1,000 in all, were women. 80% were black. 260 children were murdered. Well, let me give you a little statistic that you didn't read about in your paper. This was not mass suicide. This was mass murder by the CIA. Dr. Mutu, the Guyanan coroner, didn't go along. He wouldn't go along with the CIA. He had his own autopsy report. And unlike the American report, here's what the chief medical examiner of Guyana had to say. He said, quote, 80 to 90% of the victims had needle marks on backs and shoulders. All the others were shot or strangled. His conclusion, mass murder. Mass murder. They said Jim Jones killed himself after everyone else, with a pistol, after everyone else practically committed suicide. But guess what? Dr. Mutu, the chief medical examiner from Guyana, said the gun that shot Jones was 200 feet away from his body. How can you shoot yourself, kill yourself with suicide? What do you do then? Take your gun and throw it 200 feet away from your body? An impossibility. Dr. Mutu concluded that out of over 900 dead, only 2 committed suicide. Only 2. And they may have been forced. Now, the U.S. Army investigation said, quote, no autopsies are needed. The cause of death is not an issue. In other words, my friends, there was no autopsy completed except by Dr. Mutu, and he revealed the truth. My friends, not only that, but the top lieutenants around Jim Jones were CIA and FBI. These are the kinds of things that we need to investigate. Here's U.S. News and World Report. What little does come out explains this is all mistakes by the CIA or whatever. Here's a report called The CIA's Darkest Secrets. But U.S. News and World Report said just mistakes. Well, here's not a mistake. Here's a book put out called CIA, Cocaine in America. A veteran of the CIA drug wars tells all. Of course, there's Bo Gritz, who exposed the CIA drug operations in Southeast Asia. And there's so much more. We could talk, for example, about the AIDS virus. Did you know there's a new virus 100 times more deadly than AIDS? Did you know that after World War II, we helped the Japanese who experimented on U.S. soldiers, World War II POWs, with germ warfare in exchange for them helping us to develop our own germ warfare capability? Did you know that we let them go free and didn't try them? AIDS. Here's an article that says, AIDS biowarfare experiment out of control. This article discusses the distinct possibility that at Fort Detrick, Maryland, the U.S. Army right now is developing biological toxins. And many people say that working in concert with the United Nations World Health Organization, first Africa, then Haiti, and now maybe the United States of America, the AIDS virus was manufactured in the lab through biotechnology and given out to control the excess populations of the world. Well, that is the excess according to Big Brother. Now there's so much more we could talk about. How about the fact that in Operation Phoenix, the CIA operation, 50,000 people were assassinated, most of them innocent, down in Vietnam by the Central Intelligence Agency working with the U.S. military. Recently, Wesley Swearingen, former FBI agent, wrote a book called FBI Secrets, an Agent's Expose. He said the FBI agents plotted assassinations of American citizens, put innocent individuals in jail. The FBI. The National Educator wrote this article. The FBI, America's #1 terrorist group. How about this? The Jubilee, another newspaper back in December of '93, said the FBI linked to World Trade Center bombing. Oh, I thought it was the Arab terrorists. I thought it was Sheikh Abdul Rahman. Do you think they could have been the fall guys, just like Lee Harvey Oswald, patsies? Did you know that suddenly we found out that an FBI informant who had been paid $1 million had been in there and was going to be the chief witness against these Arab Muslims? I think they were set up, my friends. I don't think they did the bombing. I think it was the FBI and a CIA hit. And what did they do it? To stir up people, to inflame people, to make people worried about terrorism across America, to make people be so willing to give up their freedoms and liberties. So willing to say, yes, give us an anti-terrorist bill, even if it does take away our rights. Yes, give us a police state in America. Just like Hitler burned down his own Reichstag building, his own, the equivalent of the U.S. Capitol building in Germany on February the 27th, 1933. Now we have our own government, I believe, burning down buildings, exploding things. Why? For the same reason Hitler did. Here's an article from the Hoskins Report out of Lynchburg, Virginia. Very interesting. It says the Arab terrorists arrested for that bombing quickly realized they had been set up. It was then that they played their ace in the hole. They produced tapes of a U.S. government agent urging them to blow up the very trade towers that were attacked. Hoskins writes, quote, and asks, quote, why is the U.S. government so interested in having someone blow up something in America? Well, more. Here's an article from Canada, published in Nexus Magazine, January 1995. Canadian neo-Nazi group created by Britain's MI5. Now, it's a very interesting thing. According to this article, and I've read this in other cases, a neo-Nazi group, according to the Toronto Sun, was given $50,000 by the intelligence agency. They set up the neo-Nazi group. Why would they do this? My friends, I'm telling you, right here in America, the Aryan type of groups, the neo-Nazi groups, even the KKK, I wonder if they're not funded. It's called order out of chaos. They create the chaos, and then they say we need these police powers to have order. Did you know that the Supreme Court suspected the FBI was spying on them? Here's another case of Gestapo state. It says some police thought that the late Justice William Douglas, a touch paranoid when he declared himself morally certain that all Supreme Court wires were tapped by the FBI. But as Douglas noted in his autobiography, two of the chief justices with whom he served, Charles Evan Hughes and Earl Warren, worried at different times that the court's conference room was bugged. This is from the Wall Street Journal, September 1, 1992. And my friends, the FBI, even the Supreme Court of the United States, the 9 justices, believe that their rights and liberties are in jeopardy. They can't even hold secret proceedings and discuss the judicial matters of this great nation without worrying that the FBI has bugged their offices and their rooms and chambers. Something has to be corrected here. Well, my friends, there's so much more here. We're running out of time. The lies, the deception, the sacrifices. I want you to understand, though. I want you to please understand that this is what the Bible said would happen in the last days. Dark sentences spoken by Big Brother, the beast of Revelation 13 and the book of Daniel. Well, my friends, I'm going to tell you what God is going to do about this. What God is going to do about it. We read in Revelation chapter 11, verses 15 and 18, about the last days, about the kingdoms of this world, and how they shall become the kingdoms of the people of God. That's right. God is going to wrap things up, my friends. And all of these world kingdoms that you see, the New World Order, things are going to be ended. A new world will come, all right, when Jesus returns again. You know what it says there in that verse in Revelation? It says that God will destroy them which destroy the earth. He will destroy them which destroy the earth. They have destroyed the innocent. They have slaughtered the hapless victims of this earth. But God will come back and He will destroy them. Recently reading a quote the other day that I think is very, very important. It talks about a pit. A pit. And I thought this really applied to Big Brother. Here it is in Ecclesiastes chapter 10, verse 8. I like this verse. I think you will too, my friend. He that diggeth a pit shall fall into it. Well, Big Brother has been busy for decades and decades building a pit. But God says, vengeance is mine. And it is Big Brother who will fall into the pit. Friends, this is Tex Mars. I want to thank you for ordering this important video. Let's get the message out. Get the message out that though Big Brother may be empowered, though our Congress may be rigged against us, God is still on the throne. He still answers prayer. And you're still uppermost in His mind. This is Tex Morris. May God richly bless you.